Hello again. My name is Christian Williams. This is for the CIRC04 A Attempt. The date is October 13th of 2021. Getting kind of right into it here, we are using a continuation of what we learned in C and B to control a server and do something a little bit more meaningful with it. When I saw the server kind of twitch back and forth, I got an idea was inspired to create like a floor indicator that you might find in an old-timey elevator. And so I kind of want to create it basically a elevator panel for as a source of inspiration. So the program itself borrows some elements from that. It also borrows some elements from my strongman device that I created earlier as one of my A attempts. The difference is we are, of course, using a servo, but we are learning what we learned from there in terms of starting how we're using arrays and how we use the piezo device to create a tone when we get to each floor of the elevator. So for the code itself, the first thing we have to do right off the bat is we have to include this library, the servo library. The reason for that is we are using a servo, and the normal programming by itself does not normally contain commands for the servo. Or if it does, it's extremely complicated. What this library allows us to do is it gives us more terms and functions that we can use to control the servo with our Arduino. The next step is we have to start declaring our variables. And oh boy, there were a lot of variables that we had to do. So first, I decided to name our servo the indicator, because this is the part that will be indicating which floor you are on. And then the next up, we have to use an array. So we have this integer floor LED array, and we are defining these 4 LEDs, the floor LEDs, to pins 4, 5, 6, and 7 using that array. That does, in one line of code, what it would take to do, saves me typing 4 lines of code, because now I can just say, hey, all these 4 pins, they're floor LEDs. Same thing goes with the buttons. All these buttons are connected to these pins. And these arrays will define which LED will turn on with each floor and which button will select each floor. Then we also created an integer that I named chime. This is our piezo elephant. All right. This is our piezo element that will create a little door chime. Now, thankfully, I chatted back with my professor a little bit because I wanted to learn more about how to use these arrays, because something I didn't know how to do before was how do I pull the variables back out to define them further. Because in this case, I need each button to do something specific, right? I have the floor 1 button has to do something specific to floor 1. So it has to set the servo to indicate that we're on floor 1 and all that sort of stuff. And so what we have to do is, because we have used an array, how that information or data is stored is in this position that 4 is currently in position 0 in the array. 5 is in position 1, 6 is in position 2, and 7 is in position 3. That's because the computer starts at 0. It doesn't start at 1. And so, in order to tell it to further define each aspect of that array, I have to define it. So I want floor 4 to be the floor button that is in position 0 in this array. So in this case, pin 9 is now associated with floor 4. Same thing here. Floor 3, I want it to be associated with the pin 10, or for the value that is in position 1 in that array, which is pin 10. So now 4.3 is also connected to pin 10. So that way the Arduino knows that. Same thing with the LEDs. So LED 4, LED 3, LED 2, and LED 1 are pulling their values from the 0, 1, 2, and 3 position within the floor LED array. And that allows me to further define them. And that way I don't have to type floor button every single time I'm trying to talk about a button. I could specifically say F4 for that button, or L4 for that light. All right, so that is our values out of the way. We then move into setup. Setup's rather short because we are using a for loop for each of these. First off, we have to select that our indicator is attached to pin 3. Again, the indicator is what's going to be that little arrow that tells us what floor we're on. And that attach function is something unique to the Servo library that we included at the top. Then we have this for statement using this integer, and that just helps us define all 4 of our floor LEDs to output. And same with this for statement, all 4 of our floor buttons to input. And that uses the array that we defined further up here. And then we just are saying, hey, the piezo element, that's also output, and that's in pin 13. Then we move on to the main body of the program, so the void loop. So the first thing that I need my Arduino to do is I need it to read the current state of each of the buttons. Because the Arduino doesn't understand how buttons work in real life, we have to explain it to it. So first I'm going to start with a floor 4 button, and I'm going to tell it to read the value of pin 9. It's going to read that voltage in that system, and it's going to determine if it's high or low. And at that position, it's going to be able to say, hey, if I detect something opposite of this, like if I sense that the button is now low and it's supposed to be high, I know that means the button is pressed. And so now I've done that with each of these 4 buttons, so the Arduino knows, hey, it is able to indicate and know when we've hit each of the 4 buttons. Next up, I have an integer for travel time. This magical elevator can get to any floor within 3 seconds. I hope you brought a helmet, and I hope you have health insurance. I basically just chose 3 seconds because that seemed like enough time to do whatever we needed to. And then very briefly, I set each of the buttons with an if-else statement. So if the button is pressed, I want you to turn on a light, start quote-unquote traveling, move the arrow to the selected floor, play a chime, and then turn the light off since we've arrived at that floor. And that happens with all 4 of these buttons. So that is the code. Now we move on to real life. This is what it looks like when it's all nice and set up and made presentable. So I have a little paper cutout just to kind of make it look a little bit more realistic, to make it more user-friendly as to what's going on. I currently have it already turned on. Normally this arrow would be in the neutral position, but in an actual elevator it would stay there. So if I want to go to floor 4, I hit this button up here. Excellent. And now if I want to go to floor 2, and I'm done with the workday, so I want to go back to floor 1. All right, so now that you've seen it in action, we're going to kind of remove the hood here so you can see the actual wiring. As you can see here, there's quite a lot of elements on this board. First off, we have our servo up here. In my servo, the signal or the sensor is the white wire, which I know it's a little confusing. This red wire here connected to the pin is actually connected to that white pin. I didn't have a white wire that was that long to kind of make it consistent, but you can see those 2 green wires are connected to ground and 5 volt, respectively. First up, we have our 4 buttons here, which these orange wires here are sensing and connected to their various pins here, along with the resistors. These resistors help the Arduino detect that change in voltage so it knows if the button is on or off. Something different that I did for this project, and I kind of explained it before, I got rid of those little jumper pins, and I've instead decided to power this column as well, simply because I was running out of space on this side. So these 2 columns here are now also powered. So in this column, I have our 4 LEDs hooked up to their sensors with the resistors to make sure that they don't burn out. And I have the piezo device plugged into pin 13. So that'll give our little buzzer. You can notice I don't have anything in the analog over here because I'm not using a potentiometer. Everything's pretty much either on or off type relationship, so I don't have to worry about that. Obviously, I still have the 2 power cords plugged in there. And then over here, you can see the servo connects underneath the paper to this little guy here. So, quick demonstration now that the cover is off. We're going to go to floor 4. If I actually hit it, there we go. We're going to go to floor 2 to chat with my boss about something. And then the break room's on floor 3 of the Arduino elevator. And then my workday's done, so I'm going to go back to the ground floor and go off for the day. And there you have it. That is my CIRC04 A Attempt. I had a lot of fun with this. I'm also very thankful to my professor who was able to explain arrays a little bit more in detail ahead of time. We'll be learning that more in Chapter 6, it sounds like, but I wanted to do this project, so I wanted to learn how to pull those variables out of the array again. So that was very helpful. Yeah, so I had a lot of fun with this, and thanks for watching.